Greetings and salam alaikum. Welcome on behalf of the Shaykh Fadhlalla Haeri Foundation to another Uncommon Dialogue presentation. Today's discussion is between journalist and political commentator Richard Esco and Shaykh Fadhlalla Haeri, and they will be talking about the individual and the community, the one and the many. Richard Esco is a writer and host and managing editor of the 0 Hour on radio and TV. He is also a senior advisor for health and economic justice at Social Security Works. Shaykh Fadhlalla, as most of you know, is a Sufi philosopher and guide who has spent the last 40 years of his life in sharing what it means to be human, how to live a life in harmony with all dimensions of reality, and how to awaken to divine consciousness, according to Islamic metaphysics. In this series of dialogues, Shaykh Fadhlalla has often spoken about how this life is characterized by dualities or pluralities, and how important it is to differentiate between what applies to worldly existence and what we must consider when it comes to awakening to our essence and finding inner freedom. The relationship between the micro and the macro is critical to understand. Private morality has its reflection in social justice, but situations and circumstances keep changing. Nowadays, it seems as though there is a global epidemic in racism, Islamophobia, misogyny, genocidal oppression, and other social blights. It all can change, but how? How does the category of individual relate to the category of community? So here I'm going to hand over to Richard to put forward his questions. Handing it over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mona, and thank you, Shaykh Fadhlalla, for taking the time to speak with us. I was excited to speak with you about this topic of the individual and the community, because it's very important to me personally in terms of my work and my own development, but I think it's also very important to anyone who wants to evolve on an individual level, but also wants to be a good citizen of their community, of their nation, of the world as a whole. So I think the topic has a deep resonance for many of us. So I appreciate your willingness to speak with us on this topic, and I'm wondering if you have any opening thoughts as we begin this conversation.
The biggest mystery in life is life itself. What is life? How does it relate to space and time? What is the relationship between me and eternal life, cosmic life, and my life? This is where again the issue of the individual and the many comes about. This mystery of life manifesting in countless different varieties of identities and individuals is the main issue that confronts us. If you believe in a cosmic reality or a God or an entity that's beyond the confines of space and time, then it becomes a bit easier. You can say there is this reality, permanent, eternal, boundless. From it manifests the universe and the multiverse and you and I and he and she. And as this manifestation occurs, it is connected at that time to life itself, to eternal life itself. Therefore, it's obsessed by it and fears losing it, which is death. Once you get this model that truth, reality, that which is constant, is cosmic and is not subject to time, whereas once I begin to identify myself with beginning and end, birth and death, then I am confronted with this serious, if you like, challenge. Who am I really? Why do I fear death? What happens then? I want to have a good destiny. Will I get a good one? All of these questions arise because of my identity as this entity. And this entity in its multiplicities becomes community and society and everybody else. So this is the ultimate issue that confronts us all. Not until you know personally that your life is not separate from life itself, and therefore, as your life, as a human being, you're obsessed with life itself, and that your soul or your spirit or your essence continues anyway. The fear and sorrows and all of the other usual day-to-day feelings change radically. That is the whole issue.
Idea that each individual contains within them, in a sense, a reflection of the universe. I may not be putting it well, but that's my understanding. And it's, I think, what you're saying also is that a civilization, a society, also reflects the state of the individuals within it, and vice versa. So that if I understand correctly, the chaos of the United States, in my case, of Western civilization, so-called, that those things, in effect, I contain that chaos within myself too. I contain that universe of disorder within myself, so that perhaps, if I understand correctly, it's a two-way street here where I can't address such chaos fully without addressing the chaos within, and vice versa. And I'll ask you in a moment whether I'm on the right track or not, but I'll also say what comes to mind is Rudyard Kipling, who knew something about empires in decline, once wrote that a people, a society, let me see if I get it. I believe it was a civilization in decline begins to resemble its own shadow. That when he was writing at the time about Germany as it descended into Nazism, but I wonder to what extent the inner shadow, the shadow of the individual self, is also being reflected in the chaos we see all around us. Am I on the right track at all here?
Like everything else in life, there are always two. So if you want to focus a bit more on individual, personal, collective, political chaos, you will see it. But equally, if you take a macro view, you see that our evolution and the rise in consciousness towards higher lights has been persistent and consistent over the ages. Collectively, human beings, our so-called civilization, our understanding of how things work, physics, the chemistry, all of the other things, is far more advanced now than it was 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago. But now, bear in mind that this rise in consciousness, this arc towards pure consciousness, gives us a greater responsibility and greater opportunities also. It is with that review, with that in mind, that we say, look, we are causing ourselves, a cul-de-sac, or entering into an endless, whatever, game of darkness. So we have to put the two together. On the individual sense, we're suffering, our unhappiness, our expectations is becoming more and more highlighted. But at the same time, there has been far greater respect in terms of life. 200-300 years ago, many parts of the world, you could kill people and you get away with it. Not anymore. So life has become more and more, acceptable as a reverential, as a respectable thing. This is a big thing. So it means that we are all individuals and collectives. We are accepting the truth that we are obsessed with life. We like to prolong life. Look at the medical industry, longer life. Don't, respect time. Time is money. Time is wealth. What does that mean? It's the timeless. It is that perpetuity that we are totally, in every way, in adoration of, love, respect, and obsessed with. Meaning we're obsessed with the life giver. We're obsessed with God, if you like. We're obsessed with truth, which is eternal. That is the key. If individuals, we respect that for our own sake and everybody else's sake, then you begin to get out of the, if you like, womb in which we find ourselves in a way entrapped, which is the earthly womb. Quran is a brilliant declaration that nothing ever is created except in twos. So there is the mother's womb, and then there is the earthly womb. So we are now in the earthly womb, in a sense, constricted in space and time, as was in the mother womb. And we want to get out. That's why nothing will be enough. We're crazy trying to get out of our tiny little, if you like, environmental thing of our galaxy. We are in our nature, we want to have boundlessness. That's why there is greed. Nothing is enough. We want that which is limitless. It's not enough to have a wealth. In fact, I remember one very wealthy person once said, if somebody asked him, how much are you worth? He said, if I knew what is my worth, I wouldn't consider myself wealthy. So you must go beyond, if you like, the limited boundaries of space and time. And that can only be accessed through leaving behind the limited mentality consciousness of this conditioned consciousness. Once you leave that behind, we call it transcendence, we call it awakening. Give it other names, it doesn't matter. It means you're touching another zone of consciousness, which is boundless, which is the quality of your own soul. Mind is limited. It is there to grapple with cause and effect, relating up and down, good and bad, attraction and repulsion, so that we survive in this second womb conditioned state. So our nature as humans is limited, conditioned, and is bound to, with others, with hundreds of visible and invisible, if you like, connections, emotions, all of the other things that we have, as well as it is constantly being nourished, energized by supreme consciousness, by boundless consciousness, by the consciousness within the soul. So that's the whole story. Once we see it individually, then you begin to realize that whoever you are respecting or electing in the polity sense have to have that, if you like, reference. They must have that constant, if you like, calibration. If not, it becomes a worldly thing. They promise less taxation, more alcohol, more this, more of that. And more and more and more, we end up being choked and choking the earth as we are doing. It's ludicrous. We have no proper measure as to who deserves more to be a leader in any level. So we have ended up evaluating everything according to its monetary value, and that is transitory anyway. The money that you have now may be worthless 50 years time. It was worthless before. The endeavors you've had, so, 100 years ago, you would have been quite proud to have an uncle who was in the railway, and he was a railroad baron, or he was this or an oil baron. Now it is ludicrous. It's a burden. So, and so on and so. So things change, values change, but our evaluating things according to higher, sustainable, if you like, more reliable values doesn't change. We want that which is permanent, eternal, constant, not subject to space and time.
On this road to transcendence, Shaykh Fadhlalla, one of the things I think about is, certainly here in the United States, there's a kind of faddish, I would call it, move towards mindfulness, meditation of various kinds, but much of it is solely inner-directed, that it's just about my mental state in this moment and how to alter it in such a way perhaps that I'm a better instrument for my corporate employer, or I'm just, there's a sense that the road to transcendence is a solitary road, is an individual road. And there's a lot of suffering in the world. So, and I think about the fact that we as human beings have mirror neurons. It's part of our brain structure that we respond. We're designed to respond with compassion and care and empathy towards others. So I wonder to what extent this road to transcendence, to become, which in a sense I feel to transcend being human is to become fully human, and to what extent that process is in fact a collective one rather than an individual one, and that perhaps these sort of expensive spas where people practice mindfulness in Tucson, Arizona, or whatever, may be off track a bit because they're missing the social part of what it means to be human. I would love to know your thoughts on that.
You see, I and you and every one of us is made up of two entities in terms of consciousness. One of them is supreme, super, boundless consciousness, divine consciousness. And the other one is human, cultural, religious, all of the other conditioning that we go through. So each one of us is made up of these two. You can't deny one, you can't deny the other. So the issue is the extent of calibration of these two. So what you mentioned, transcendence, all what it means is that my conditioned state and my thoughts and my concern and my anxiety and my limited security or whatever it is has a place in my life, but it has to be in a way put aside before I can recalibrate with super consciousness, supreme consciousness, timeless, boundless. And then that calibration brings about appropriateness. It brings about the right perspective. Once I know that any minute I may die, this idea of solid, if you like, security becomes ludicrous. I'm hanging on air. After air, I'm dependent on water. After that, I'm dependent. So I am dependent all the time. Then I'm dependent on others, the environment, etc., etc. I'm not separate from all that is in nature. I'm a product of that as a physical entity. So putting things in perspective is more appropriate than the ideas of mindfulness, mindlessness, transcendence, or enlightenment. These are all words. All what I need to do is to be real. Do not deny my pain or hunger or anxiety or mental anguish or guilt. Don't deny any of that. How can I? It's part of me. Equally, you must understand that these have arisen because I've acted without taking in cognizance the overall environment and the context, not having put things in the right context, in the right reference. So if you are aware in the moment, if you are alive in the moment, connecting the moving, changing moment and the timelessness in you, then you have no regrets. You will do the same thing over if you are given that chance again. So you are present. It's all to do with that constancy of presence without denying also the passing moment. So, oh, that was me 10 years ago. I no longer like those things. I no longer do those things. I no longer have those habits or hobbies. Fine. But there is a constancy which we call the you, the I. It's actually a reflection of the real you, which never changes. And that is a grace. That is a gift, if you like, from beyond our mind to comprehend. We call it God, Allah, whatever. So you and I and every one of us have the same soul. That is why in politics, with regards to others, otherness is only superficial. In reality, we are all the same soul. And the soul is boundless, infinite, and loves itself and knows its eternal nature. It is the shadow of it, the so-called self, is going to cause you and I a lot of trouble, or can refer to its origin, the soul, and therefore it becomes a very good, earthly, worldly, if you like, human being. Nothing wrong with that. Both of them are compatible. As long as the more I am aware of the higher, the timeless, the less I am likely to mess about with the short term, the so-called I, the emotional I, the animal I. It will always be there. As long as I'm breathing, there will be an animal. There will be a touch of the ego. There will be but it will not overwhelm me. Equally also sorrow, anxiety, regrets, they will not overwhelm one. So yes, I'm so, because a loss is regrettable. Life is to gain. Gain what? The knowledge of the truth. What is the truth? Your soul, my soul, is eternal. Once you know that, then there is no fear about that. No fear about that doesn't make you foolhardy and subject yourself to all kinds of dangers. No, you maintain your respect for life. You are still obsessed with life, because in truth there is only truth, and that is manifesting as life. Nothing, all what changes is your silly attitudes and forgetfulness and all of that. You still remain as good a human as possible, but more than that, you are truly taking your energy, your reference, your calibration from the constancy of the divine soul in you. And that is why then the community or society will behave itself better. Politicians will behave themselves better, rather than promising more of the animal tendency. More money, more drink, more drug, more. And that's what's appealing. And that's why we are in such a mess. And that mess will continue until individuals, there are enough individuals who say, no, I have to curb my animal self. I have to curb my just vanity, my fantasies, my wastefulness. Otherwise, we are choking ourselves to death and still singing some silly hymns or songs about progress, about civilization, about rubbish. Progress emanates from the eternal light to show that eternal light is there, which we call grace. Progress is living gracefully, not so much of accumulation as we have. So, but the situation we are in is continuing headlong towards a self-destructiveness. That is why dangers have to be highlighted through looking at the situation we have ecologically, the increase in global temperature, increase in physical, if you like, uncertainties, in all of the things that are reminding us that we have not been behaving ourselves well, in the sense that we have a purpose here. And the purpose is through intelligence to realize we are essentially heavenly, permanent, boundless realities we call soul or spirit, without it necessarily becoming too religious, high-handed. No, just that there is an entity in each one of us that will never be content with earthly power, wealth, and abilities. Not enough. But once you know that, then you'll accept that this is enough. This house is enough, or this meal is enough, or this stipend or salary is enough. Thank you. At the moment, the collective is in chaos because the individual is in chaos. So they reflect each other.
It seems to me, Shaykh, that part of that chaos comes from our failure to understand our own responsibility for growth and our tendency to look to strong leaders. That, to me, the rise of various despotic figures around the world is a sign of people waiting to be rescued rather than changing themselves and changing the world around them. And yet, on the other hand, there have been moments in history when individuals of realization have seem to have become the vectors for the source of transmission for great change. Muhammad, Jesus, and in more modern times, perhaps Martin Luther King, Mandela, whomever. But it seems to me that we need to understand as individuals in society, not to look for leaders, but at the same time to be open for those to recognizing these doors of possibility that may incarnate themselves in one or another person. And I'm wondering your thoughts about that.
It is evolution. Evolution is the arc that takes everything that is alive in its wake towards the absolute, if you like, final abode of supreme consciousness. So that's been moving faster and faster. We have evolved a lot. The impact of individuals will be less and less and less. 100 years ago, an individual wouldn't survive unless the neighbors approve, or the tribe, or the clan, or the family. You wouldn't survive. Not anymore. In fact, the last 2-3 decades, outwardly, in terms of material well-being, you do very well if you run away from the family business and the family confines. So it has moved from being the horizontal concern. What do the neighbors say? What do the people in the church say, or in the mosque? What would Muhammad say? That has begun to move more and more towards me. I want to be happy. I want to be content. I don't want to have over concern. I don't want to have anxiety. I want to be present. The moment is immense, it's beautiful. I can't see it anymore. I can't see the birds, I can't see the flowers, because I'm obsessed with fears and concern about my being out of job, out of this, out of deprived or left out. So it had moved from being horizontal for thousands of years to being vertical now. You and the light in you. And the more you are focused and calibrating and responsible and accountable to the light in you, the more likely that the human outcome of it also is not that dangerous, more reliable, more understandable. So this is what has happened. It's evolutionary issue. There had been a dozen factors that made this evolutionary rise become much faster and much more potent than we could ever imagine. One of the biggest factors in that is the emancipation of women. The last 50 years. 100 years ago, her role was mostly procreational and to back up the man. Soon it will be almost the reverse. That it will be men who are backing up the women leaders. So these are major, major factors in life. We don't know how to build them into the formula, but there has been tremendous change in the last few decades in an evolutionary sense. We are not who we were in terms of values, concerns, responsibilities, what we were 60, 70, 80 years ago. And that is why you see 50, 60, 70 years ago, the entire communal political thing was how strong is your nation? How big is your armed forces? And everybody counted the number of ships they had, the number of this they had, and then soon the number of atom bombs they had. I assure you, soon a time will come that a nation that has a lot of these things will be put to shame because they're useless. They don't know what to do with it. Already the graveyards of the great aircraft carriers and all of that is bulging that they don't know what to do with it. The cost of maintaining the, if you like, the nuclear bombs in itself is far more than the most of the, if you like, GDPs of 2/3 of the world nations. It's going to be ludicrous. You will see. What's going to count is the individual state and the individual's connection with the light inward. If they are connected with the eternal light, then they have no fear of death. Say, look here, I'm going to continue like this. I'm not causing pain, anguish, or suffering to others, but this is my values. I won't do it. Try and budge that person. How are you going? All of this business of, the ultimate war on this and that in order to win minds and hearts. Heart belongs to that light. Mind is human, but it's as good as the heart state. We are at the beginning of major, major, major changes in the human situation on Earth. Part of it may be irreversible in its self-destruct state. Part of it may move to this, what I'm describing, awakened to the cosmic reality of our own souls.
You mentioned, among many things of value, you mentioned the struggle to empathize with others and not just focus on oneself. I read a study recently, Shaykh Fadhlalla, on people. It showed that people in the United States and Europe who scored higher on empathy, on empathic traits, were actually more likely to have hostile views towards groups and peoples that were not themselves. For example, immigrants, that they were people with high empathic qualities. It seems paradoxical at first, were more likely to have bigotry against immigrants or people of other races and so on. But when you think about it, it makes some sense that if I live in an all-white enclave somewhere and only all the people I know look like me and share a certain culture with me, I'm going to empathize only with them. And I'm going to perceive other groups as a threat. And my empathy turns into a kind of tribal, warlike impulse. So I'm wondering if to some extent the civilizational threats we face, and of course, in my country, people are very happy to support an insanely large military budget, call it a defense budget, because they empathize perhaps with each other, but not with the people around the world who are suffering as a result. And I wonder to what extent the mismatch, you mentioned mind and heart, that these empathic people have heart, but they don't yet have the mind or the awareness to apply their empathy more universally. Is this compatible in any way with what you've been saying?
You know, empathy is to do with the reflective feeling exchange with others, which is also to do with mirror neurons and other factors that we can discern. And like everything else, it can be local. Like so many of big gangsters have got tremendous empathy towards their family, their wives, even a cat. You know, the empathy is very local, very limited. So the others I can go and, you know, gangsterize and steal and kill, whatever. So it's become a local empathy. If you take it wider into universal empathy, then it is the extent that you have moved to the soul or the spirit, which is cosmic. So empathy is a good thing, but as long as it flows, once you stop it, then it becomes localized and contained, and you know it's not the same. So that becomes more emotional. You become very much know my clan. We are of the same clan, we have the same religion, we have the same color of skin, therefore we are together. For how long? That's why I said is now humanity has moved more from the horizontal towards the vertical. What you're talking about empathy is still horizontal. But once empathy becomes the presence of life, then it is vertical. Life is the truth. Life is eternal. Life is constant. Life is the manifestation of God. Life is what we all worship and revere, whether we know it or not. You know, so that's why we have to have respect for life, whether it is an ant or it's an elephant. But we don't. We've been ransacking the whole earth and a tree. So we have become too powerful as individual brutes, and we are all paying the price for it in health, in mind, in insecurity, and also in communal situations. So if empathy is allowed to reach its origin, which is oneness, cosmic oneness, without differentiation in it, from it comes a touch of differentiation and that first second of the Big Bang in which everything began to occur, ending up with the most diverse, amazing universe we have, the billions of galaxies with the billions of stars in them. And they have their own cosmologies. And there are 90% of events are still mysterious to us. Our mind is very limited. Our mind is to connect our animal state, which has evolved mysteriously from a tiny little bacteria or whatever, to the amazing light of lights, which we call the presence of God. God's shadow on earth is Adam or whatever. So these are all what it means is that I, as an individual, combining these two different zones, conditioned consciousness and supreme consciousness, I need to do my best to have my human side accountable, available, controllable, in order for the higher side shine its light and for it to give me the bliss that I'm looking for. Bliss does not belong to the earthly side. That is a bit of pleasure. And like everything else on the earthly side, pleasure comes with pain, whatever. Whereas the other side is not. It's the paradise that we yearn for. But if you understand all that and you're calibrating all the time with the higher spiritual inner light within you, you're already experiencing paradise. And every now and then you find the shadows and the darkness of the negative side also is there. It does not afflict you. You say, yes, you have to deal with it. You have to feed those who are needy. Don't be too abusive. Collectively, inadvertently, we've created so much outer wealth balanced with greater inner impoverishment throughout the world. That's the situation. That's why nobody's happy. And everybody is, in a way, unhappy because even when they want to flaunt their wealth, show it off, there is a touch of out of place, out of context. And also, those who don't have it will run after them with spears and axes and guns or whatever. Quite right. That's why the Quran says, look back at any situation. Do you find any fault? We are the perpetrator. We're here for a short period on earth in order to be qualified to return to the light within us, which is the heavenly zone, which is that eternal, boundless light of consciousness. We have a work to do, we have a job to do, but we get distracted. Civilization, development, more wealth, more money, more infrastructure, more pension, more. Why? Because we are scared of death. Why are we scared of it? Because we don't know it. Why we don't know it? Because we're clinging to the appearance of life. Cling to life itself. And you find you don't. Death is only a transfer from this earthly womb back again to the boundlessness of the soul.
A friend of mine who is an attorney is very fond of saying that the founding documents of the United States are a metaphor for the civilizational process. That we have the Constitution, which he points out is collective. I mean, the first word in it is we the people. That kind of spells out the collective structure and obligations of society. And then attached to it is the Bill of Rights, you know, that I have the right to assemble with others, that I have the right to publish my thoughts and so on. Even that I have the right, the army can't force me to host their soldiers in my home. I mean, so there's this kind of constant tension reflected in that between social rights and responsibilities and individual rights. And I would argue that every individual right also comes with a responsibility. If I have the right to publish my views, I should do so wisely. If I have a right, and so on. So I guess perhaps as a concluding section of our conversation, is it worth for people like myself to reflect on this tension? Because, you know, civilization seems to go in waves where the collective is more strongly enforced and then the individual is more strongly enforced. Is it worthwhile to reflect on trying to restore this balance, or is it simply a matter of I need to work on myself and my perspective of the universe, much less the society around me? What are your thoughts?
I think both. Reflect upon what happened in the past. I mean, within the American Constitution, there were great breakthroughs. I mean, the quest for happiness itself is a great statement. But if happiness doesn't lead ultimately to joy itself or bliss itself, not for any reason, to begin with, if I am in pain, my happiness lies if you can help me to remove the pain or reduce the hunger or reduce my fear of exposure to the elements or whatever. This is part of it. But take happiness further, it leads to a point where bliss and joy is for in its own way, for its own sake, not because of giving me something or removing something obnoxious from me. It is itself. It's the nature of my own soul is to be blissful, because it's not separate from the cosmic reality itself. So I think to reflect upon aspects that you have mentioned is useful. Equally, to internalize it. What about you? Because at the moment, I think we're more and more coming to the point of me, 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 me. Good. You can't reverse it. You can't say, go collective, go that. That phase had passed. Me, it is me now. Or who's the me? Me is not just this creature. How much food, how much rest, how much pleasure? Enough. But the real me is going to show itself as a cosmic light that's providing life. So, and I can't access it. It is in control of me. I can only yield to it. I can only let go into it. I can only have a Zen flow into that eternal flow of it by curbing my outer, by being accountable more and more to my intention, to my action, to the outcome. So again, correct thoughts, correct intention and action. That's it. And humbleness. And we all make mistakes. Immediately say, yes, I made a lot of mistakes. Excuse me. That's fine. The so-called you is changeable. It's only a veneer, it's only a shadow that is a reflection of the real you, which is an eternal light. The more you refer to that, the more you find your own personal state, health, quality of mind, presence, joyfulness is going to enhance. And so will society. The two balance reflect on each other. And that is why I think suffering from the outer, from the mismanagement of communities and people, having concentrated only on outcome, measurable. But it has to be balanced by the immeasurable, my own state. I'm not happy. You've given me pension, you've given me this, you've given me security of a pension house. I am unhappy, I am bored, I'm not content. Why? Because I've not done my job, which is what? To discover the real me is a light of lights. And if I know the real me is light of lights, there's nothing you need, nothing you want. And if you leave your body and mind, this is a great celebration and liberation. How many people do you find who really look upon death as a tremendous celebration? So I've done my bit to maintain this amazing complex, the most intricate instrument, which is my body and all the chemistry or the physics. Not until there are enough people who really celebrate leaving their body and mind together. The Buddhists had some period and some sections of it, magnificent situations whereby the time had come to let the body go. Don't eat anymore, don't do. Anyway, but we have become afraid of losing life. You don't gain life, you don't get life is an obsession, possesses the so-called you, has provided this amazing mystery of how these millions of different factors generate the physical, chemical, material, so-called you. And you take it for granted. You eat anything, you take it for granted that the digestive system and its intricate chemistry knows how to break it down. And then for it to give you both fuel and all of the other nutrients throughout the trillions of cells that we have. We take it for granted. We're absent-minded. Indeed, I think if you really look at it from that point of view, you find human beings are acting in the most foolish, in the most idiotic, criminal, absent-minded ways. Really, it is shame upon us. But even the word shame doesn't exist anymore. Even the word shyness doesn't exist anymore. No, you mustn't be shy. Push for it. If you are not ambitious, then you won't get it. Get what? You get it, and then you have a million other problems come with it. You know, it's crazy what we are doing. It is insane. Sometimes I wonder that some of the people whom we consider insane, they may have a touch of greater sanity than the rest of them.
We're coming to the end, Shaykh Fadhlalla, but my late uncle used to say, whether it was about having an argument or competing for a job, he always used to say something, and reflection seems to fit, which he always used to say, before you get involved in these things, ask yourself, what do I get if I win? And I think, in a sense, perhaps he was saying something like the same thing, which is that, and I guess I'll conclude, final question or statement. The Tibetan Buddhists say, drive all blames into one, which I take to mean 100,000 years ago, the father of the first family, not Adam, but whomever. Perhaps he was cruel to his wife, his children, and generation after generation, we fight because of that, and so on. So you can't blame the person oppressing you. You have to think about his parents and his society. And I suppose drive all praise into one too. Somebody did something kind 100,000 years ago. So here we are now, all together, reflecting this 100,000 years of social and individual evolution. And to me, but of course I want your thoughts in closing, to me it begins with acceptance. What do I get if I win? Here, this pageant has been going on for quite a while, and there's nothing I can do about it until I accept that what I'm seeing has been the play of millennia, and that I can't fix it by myself, but by being more aware and more responsible in my actions, I can be part of perhaps a positive trend, and accept and leave it at that. But in closing, I would say, I guess, what are your thoughts?
Each one of us is in a state which involves action and meaning. I can't be isolated. I must still do the little I can, no matter what. Move the harm from the way, move that, help, do, or at least anything. If there is nothing physical you can do it in sound, do it in meaning, do it. None of us is spared the involvement in the physical realm of change and movement and the up and the down. So it is events and actions and meaning of it. If your intention is to reduce suffering, elevate the individual towards their own state of higher intelligence of their soul, then you are genuine. You can't not be involved. You and I and every one of us is a product of our families, generation, and if you like, millions of years going back to the bacteria, which that mysterious way of awareness of life began to take place. So it's a process that had come mysteriously to be aware and aware and aware, and has evolved to the point of being aware of the cosmic light that creates life and is eternal. So I have a first responsibility towards myself, but that responsibility can only be fulfilled if I'm responsible for other selves, which are in essence the same. They also are people trying to make sense out of their nonsense. And that sense is earthly, up and down, good and bad, in the right context and out of context, and the inner light. So everyone has to move according to the state of their, if you like, spiritual evolution, until you realize that we're all, as human beings, all living entities, have the same drive to acknowledge life, God, whatever. So everybody is celebrating that. But human beings get clogged up with too many other fears, anxieties, concerns, and all of that. And we end up being like that now. Immense outer power, immense outer wealth, and immense inner poverty. We cannot deny this, if you like, challenge. Every one of us is, no matter who it is, the most enlightened person, they still touch upon the challenge. Is the extent of them running around from here to here, or preaching or teaching or making noise or writing books. That differs. But the touch of the challenge that each one of us have to do what we can to rise with the help of intelligence to the highest level of awareness or consciousness. That's all what it is. That pure consciousness that we yearn for is within us, was there before us, will be after. So that's all what it is. That's why if you say truth is only God, has been, is, and will be. And we have come by that grace, and we will realize it or attain it by that grace without losing the shadow of it, which sometimes appears as disgrace. Sometimes the shadow is most important to show where the light is. Duality is the nature of this zone that we are living in. Its essence is unity, its destiny is unity, and we yearn for that unity. That's all what it is. Simple story. We have to be honest, examine it, reflect upon it, and you find that's all what it is. So it really doesn't matter how much outer wealth you have, or a big job you have, or whatever you have done. These are fine. Enjoy it. But you will suffer from it if you identify yourself with your job ego, with your wealth ego. You'll suffer from it. And you are designed not wanting to suffer, because the soul doesn't suffer. Your spirit is not subject to suffering. And you are, in essence, a spirit. It's simple. It's done.
Well, Shaykh Fadhlalla, thank you so much. You've been so generous with your time and your insights. So once again, my gratitude.
Thank you. Thank you. I enjoy talking to you. Thank you so much. Good luck.
Thank you so much, Richard. And thank you, Shaykh Fadhlalla, for engaging us in this fascinating and deeply evocative examination of this balance between the individual and the collective, between realizing our spiritual potential and how that reflects and relates to our social, global potential. There have been many words of caution coming to us through this discussion. And I think Shaykh Fadhlalla's mapping of the way of humility, openness, honesty is a very helpful tonic. And I particularly appreciate the fact that if we come to understand the duality that underlies the nature of the zone and begin to have that kind of discrimination, the inner will reflect in the outer. Whatever we do individually will reverberate in the outer. This at least is of my own experience. It may not, the ripples and the waves may not touch the shores of beyond from where I'm sitting, but that'll touch those around me in the community, and and collectively, those waves may also bring about change. Thank you, Richard, so much for asking these difficult and challenging questions. Duality is the nature of the zone, essence is unity, and our destiny is unity, and we yearn for it. Let us end on that note as we say goodbye. Thank you so much, both of you, and thank you for joining us today. Assalamu alaikum and goodbye.